The Shep Podcast begins now.
You're listening to the Shep podcast at Shepherd Church. Everything we do here is to help you take their next step toward Jesus. This podcast is part of it. We want to help you engage daily in spiritual development. We want you to be able to get into the Word and to dive deeper in your faith each and every day. We are continuing in our 21 Days of Prayer as we look at the 21 most effective prayers in the Bible. It's a book by Dave Earley. And today, we've got a special guest in the studio. Natalie is here.
Hello.
She's going to help us. We're looking at chapter 17. It's day 17. This is the prayer of the disciples. I found in Luke 11:1. Also found in Matthew. You can find it in either place, but this one specifically coming from Luke 11, and it is, Lord, teach us to pray. So Natalie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I've got a sick kid, but other than that, can't complain.
Don't we all?
Yeah,
at this time
it is going
of year.
around, yeah.
So let's talk. I mean, we could get into just about anything, but let's kind of dive into this prayer and what's important about it, why it makes why you think it makes it into the book. I find it interesting that it's at this part of the book, although maybe he's just going chronologically.
Through the Bible, maybe
that's what
yeah.
he's doing.
We should start with this.
I was like,
at the
teach
beginning
us to
of
pray.
our
It feels like
21
should
days.
be the first prayer. Maybe that's what it is. He's just going from the beginning of the Bible to the end, which would make more sense. So okay.
Right.
So we can just edit all of that out. So let's talk about it. You read the chapter. You've got some wisdom for us from this. What kind of stuck out to you as you read and you kind of prayed this and thought through it?
I think prayer for many people can be sometimes an intimidating endeavor. When I started this, I highlighted like the first couple lines because I related to it so much. Just especially the one that says, I want to care about all the needs around me, but I just don't have enough strength, or like I'm going as hard as I can, but I'm not sure where it's getting me. I have felt that so many times in my prayers, and just feeling really intimidating, like looking around, like, where do you even start? Because there's so many needs in the world if you watch the news a lot, So I really enjoyed this devotional. I think it really helps bring you back to like the framework of how to pray. So the Lord's Prayer, just teaching us how to pray with the adoration and the submission, petition, and so on. So that was what the biggest standout to me was, just the beginning, just starting.
Yeah. I think what I've really appreciated so far in these 21 days is the simplicity of the prayers.
And
I think what you touched on kind of hits it right on the head is that if you're relatively new to faith, or even if you're not new to faith, but you're not, you don't feel like you're educated, or maybe just like you don't feel like you're good enough. You go to a church that has people who stand on the platform and pray, and they pray big prayers and big words, and they're into it, right? And that's perfectly fine. Yeah. But it can be intimidating.
So how do you get from where you're at to there? Yeah.
And that's what I've loved about all of these prayers, and especially this one. It's like, so I want to get to a place where I'm comfortable and where I know what I'm supposed to pray for. So how do I do that? Yeah. And I've read multiple books on the Lord's Prayer, and I've sat through plenty of sermons on the Lord's Prayer, and I understand that it's not just a prayer to be recited. Yeah. Like there's more to it, and that's what he does in this, is teach us to pray, giving us a model to pray. Yeah. And it's a great way to just kind of walk through what it looks like to pray the Lord's Prayer. When on our podcast, you are typically, when you come on and you're hanging out with us, you're probably one of the newest Christians on our podcast. Yes. And I don't say that to make you feel it, but it's really good to have someone like you, because you aren't settled.
I don't think that I know too much. I'm just kidding.
But you're not, like, some of us are stuck in our ways. We've been doing that. I mean, I don't
just going through the rhythms.
Yeah, I don't
not
remember a
necessarily,
time in my life where I wasn't a part of a church and had a relationship with Jesus. And so I was a kid, and you said the Lord's Prayer.
Oh.
Right? And it was just a thing that you said.
I'm like, yeah, that is a thing. Yeah, that wasn't me as a child, but yes.
And so you come into this and you start.
Yeah, from just no really foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's like in this devotional, I guess it would be, he kind of talks about some of the things that happen after you pray. And so like somebody like who I'm still very much in the beginning stages, I mean, I've gone through different seasons already in my prayer life, but I think he does a really good job at helping you to be curious. Like there's this like healthy curiosity around prayer that like makes you wonder, okay, what is actually going to happen if I were to commit to this and really take it seriously and say, okay, God, like I'm going to spend this 15 minutes or 30 minutes and I'm going to follow this map is what he calls it, that Jesus has laid out for us. And what does God do through that? And that for me, I think is really helpful, especially when I'm feeling discouraged as I'm, sometimes I felt like I'm really hitting the nail on the head, with prayer, like, I'm praying in the Spirit and I feel the Lord's presence. And then sometimes I show up and I'm like, okay, I don't even, did God hear me today? Just honest feelings of just doubt. And he kind of touches on that briefly, but just continuing to pray, I don't think I've ever met anyone who has developed a prayer life who doesn't have a testimony, with it. That, I mean, you can't, if you show up and give God your time, he definitely, he works through prayer. So.
And I think it's good for us as we keep talking about the simplicity of a prayer like this to God, Lord, teach us to pray, to understand that you don't have to be polished. You don't have to be, you don't have to be brilliant in how you speak to God, that he just wants you to come and to be yourself, to humble yourself. I think sometimes we forget that the disciples were just students of Jesus. And so they're like, hey, like that teacher taught his people how to pray. Why don't you teach us how to pray? Yeah. And so Jesus does. He they asked him a question and he answered. Yeah. And it was that kind of rubric of this is how, if I were to teach you how to pray, this is how I would pray. If you're looking for some resources on the Lord's Prayer, obviously, if you have the book, The 21 Most Effective Prayers of the Bible, there's a chapter, right? We're reading it right now. There's two other ones that I'd love to just kind of plug because I think that they are, they'd be good for you if you're looking to get into the Lord's Prayer. The first is there's a book and an app called Pray First by Chris Hodges. You can look on the app. It's free. The app's free, and it has like some different ways that you can pray, but the Lord's Prayer is one of those, and it would help you walk through step by step each day that you could pray the Lord's Prayer. The second is called Building a Discipling Culture by Mike Breen, and it has a chapter on the Lord's Prayer, and it follows similarly to this, but each one really helps to break down that prayer. That if you
what is adoration? What is?
If you want to know how to pray, if you want to be, because you're trying to get into a rhythm of it, and that's really what these 21 days is. We're trying to help you develop a rhythm of prayer. It takes 21 days to build a habit. We want you to get into a habit of prayer. The Lord's Prayer, and using that as a model or a map is a great way to dive in and to get used to praying so that you continue it and it becomes a lifestyle of prayer.
January 21st is the last day of the 21-day prayer challenge. To celebrate, we'll get together that evening in the sanctuary at Gahanna campus for music, praise, and worship. Come and celebrate with us Sunday evening, January 21st at 6 p.m. Childcare is available.
So in your life personally, then, if we want to kind of turn into that, how has kind of simple prayers or even this chapter helped you to kind of get closer to what you're wanting to be when it comes to praying? Again, being younger in faith, saying, I just want to know how to do this so that I can be closer to where I need to be. Yeah,
that I feel like this is definitely something that gives you something to fall back on, especially when you're showing up to spend time with God. And I often get too caught up in my expectations sometimes of like something's going to happen. And sometimes it really is just coming to the Lord going through the motions,
Yeah.
you know, and just being obedient, and just having faith that through that obedience, I'm going to grow through it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'm trying to remember exactly what you asked me. You asked, I forgot the question.
No, you're fine. Because again, this is a prayer to say, I want to learn how to pray.
Yeah.
So how does something like this help you personally to get to that next space? Since I've met you,
Yeah.
I've noticed that prayer has been a huge piece of why you're even a believer.
Right.
And so like coming into that cold with no prior knowledge of what it looked like to pray, how does that help?
That's kind of a little bit different, I think, in my sense. So because of my background being in the New Age belief system, I was meditating for an hour every day. Okay.
Oh,
so, and that wasn't,
so you switched that habit to prayer?
I did.
Boom.
Like the Lord was like, kind of used it.
That's great.
But listen, I don't pray for an hour every day. Like that's not a discipline that I've really kept up. And it's been a lot more, whereas before when I was obviously a part of a false belief system, it was much more systematic and like you were just showing up for it. Prayer is so much more relational and it's less forced. And while I think it's brilliant, you know, if you can devote an hour every day, I think for me, it became really legalistic. And so I had to like kind of take a step back and realize like I'm meeting with, you know, the God of the universe, you know, and it's an intimacy and it's like, it's authentic. It's not something that, you know, you want to put in a box and be like, it has to happen at this time. And so, so my journey is a little bit different in that sense. And so I don't, So,
but even in that, when you talk about something like the Lord's Prayer, if I can say it out loud. You talk about the Lord's Prayer, and it itself is very almost ritualistic. Yeah. Or it gets to that point. And to just recite it and then move on.
Right.
And I think
it's definitely to build off of.
I think there's power in that. I think there's power in being able to have something like that memorized. I'm not saying that that's not okay, but for you and for me, when we sit down, there's freedom when you do what he's taught about. The freedom to say, okay, I've got a lot to pray, because this prayer really hits all the different areas of our lives and really helps to open us up to what God has for us. And when we say we just want to know how to pray, God's like, I've already showed you. So it's right here. Here's kind of how to do it. And so being able to do that, and for it not to become this like ritual or legalistic thing, but there's this freedom that opens, like each line is another door to walk through with God. And so, but that's that. I think one of the things that really sticks out to me when you talk about teach us to pray is the humility that it takes for people like myself, because that's like the most opposite of a humble thing. Like the humility I must have. You know? I'm so humble. But the humility it takes to be able to, I've been a Christian. I can't remember a time that I wasn't in church. I've been a pastor since 2009. It does take somebody laying aside their ego to come to God and say, I don't know how to pray. I need you to, I need you to teach me how to, I don't know what I'm doing here.
I think people even go through that. And maybe that's a healthy thing in your walk. If you're even getting to that point again where you've just been walking with the Lord and it's almost like, okay, I've been doing this and this and this, and I still don't feel like I'm, you know, so, and you're still teachable. I mean, that's a huge part of our walk, I think, is remaining teachable. Yeah.
So, and, you know, as we've looked at other prayers, we've looked at deliver us, we've looked at hear us, we've looked at answer me. Every one of those prayers, I feel like, is inside the Lord's Prayer. Right? You deliver us from evil. Like, forgive us, you know, our sins, help us to forgive other people. So, like, it's interesting that all these little prayers that we've prayed all the way through today
actually fall into, like, the one in the middle of the book.
Because Jesus is like, I want to teach you how to pray. Like, these are all the prayers you need to know. They're in this prayer. And
just foundational.
So... Was there anything else that sticks out to you, or that you'd like to encourage people as they're trying to dive into their prayer life, as they read this chapter and they hear the Lord's Prayer? And is there anything that you'd like to say, like just encourage people?
Yeah, I feel like prayer has, the reason why I'm sitting here, I think, is just from prayer. Yeah. And I would want to encourage anyone who is maybe struggling, just feels like they meet resistance every single time they sit down to pray, like something comes up or a distraction or somebody's getting sick, just to continue to persevere and to stick with it, because it's worth it. And it doesn't have to be, I sat down and there was adoration. This is certainly a map and a framework, but there are times that I show up in prayer and I'm just crying instantly. And I'm just like, I'm angry or whatever. I think God just really wants us to come to him. And that's the biggest takeaway is that this is certainly how we should be praying, but it can be messy. It doesn't have to always look this way, but it's good to fall back on always when you're lost.
Yeah, that's good. So let's end it like this. I'd like to just read these 4 verses for us, and then we will wrap up. It says this in Luke 11. It says, he was praying in a certain place. Jesus was praying in a certain place. And when he finished, one of the disciples said to him, Lord, teach us to pray, just as John taught his disciples. And he said to them, whenever you pray, say, Father, your name be honored as holy, your kingdom come, give us each day our daily bread, forgive us our sins, for we ourselves also forgive everyone in debt to us, and do not bring us into temptation. That's going to wrap up our episode today. We hope it encourages you. We hope that you keep sticking with the 21 days of prayer. We just have a few days left to go, and we hope to see you on Sunday evening as we gather and worship and prayer together. My thanks to Natalie for coming on and for sharing with us today. If you need anything else, if you have any questions or comments, you can get a hold of us at podcast@shepnaz.org. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.